Today, we're unpacking a massive geopolitical paradox. We're going to look at how China bypassed a crippling US chip ban, managed to build world-class artificial intelligence, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, decided to just give it away for free. It is honestly one of the wildest technological comeback stories we've seen in a long time. And honestly, the way they pulled it off is going to completely change how you view the global AI race. Just a few years ago, the logic in Washington seemed pretty foolproof. The idea was simple. Block China from getting their hands on the absolute most advanced NVIDIA AI chips, and they will definitively lose the global AI race, period. The thinking was literally, if you don't have the absolute best hardware, there is no way you can build the best software. And experts were warning that if this containment policy wasn't executed flawlessly, the US was going to lose its edge. So the whole US strategy was explicitly designed to cripple China's progress by cutting off the physical engine of AI. But the reality we're seeing today, it's the exact opposite of what all those experts predicted. Instead of falling behind or crashing, Chinese AI models aren't just surviving, they're actively becoming the foundational infrastructure that global developers are building their own apps on top of. And the proof is really in the adoption. Get this. Today, a massive 60% of AI usage by US companies actually relies on Chinese AI models, like Kimi K3 and Alibaba's QN 3.8. Like if you've been on Pinterest or booked an Airbnb recently, you might already be interacting with Chinese AI powering their internal systems. Pinterest actually reported slashing their costs by as much as 90% in some workloads just by switching to these open source models. It's a real game changer. So, how exactly did they pull off this massive comeback? Well, we have to start by looking at how they overcame this absolute brick wall of a hardware ban. The US didn't just tell American companies to stop selling chips. They actually dusted off this old rule from 1959 called the Foreign Direct Product Rule. It basically says, if a product is made anywhere in the world using even a tiny bit of American tech or IP, the US can block its sale. So in October 2022, boom, they block NVIDIA's advanced H100 chips. But then, plot twist, just a year later, in 2023, the Chinese state-backed manufacturer SMIC absolutely shocked everyone. They managed to produce 5G chips for Huawei smartphones completely without the best Western manufacturing machines. Now, at first, things were a little desperate. You had these crazy smuggling routes opening up through places like Malaysia and Hong Kong. You even had high-stakes, low-yield student couriers making like $100 a pop to sneak a half dozen chips in their luggage. But, you can't build a national AI industry out of a backpack. The real breakthrough was domestic manufacturers like CIMEC just rolling up their sleeves and figuring out how to MacGyver their way to innovation, using older, completely unrestricted equipment. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't perfectly efficient, but it kept them in the game. Which brings us to the software side of things, where they basically had to adopt a smarter, not harder approach to survive. Because their domestic chips were still noticeably slower than NVIDIA's, Chinese engineers knew they couldn't just build massive brute force supercomputers. They had to aggressively pivot. A perfect example of this pivot is a concept called mixture of experts, or MOE. Think about it like this. Let's say you run a 200-person company. If a marketing problem pops up, you don't drag the entire 200-person company into a conference room, right? You just call the marketing team. DeepSeek took this concept and pushed it to the absolute extreme. They sliced their model into 256 tiny, hyper-specialized expert clusters. So if you ask it to write code, it only wakes up the 8 specific experts needed for coding. The rest of the model stays asleep, which saves a massive amount of computing power. And the result of that kind of hyper-efficient engineering, absolutely jaw-dropping cost advantages. Look at this comparison. While top-tier Western models like GPT and Claude are charging roughly $5 to $10 just for input and $30 to $50 for output, DeepSeek is operating at a fraction of that. We're talking 40 cents for input and 87 cents for output. It completely proves the radical efficiency of their software against the Western giants. And they definitely didn't stop there. They also cooked up this technique called multi-head latent attention, or MLA. Imagine you're talking to an AI about a 100-page legal document. Normally, the AI has to hold all 100 pages active in its short-term memory to chat with you about it, which is incredibly expensive computationally. MLA basically acts like compressing that giant 100-page document into a couple of sticky notes of highly organized bullet points. It slashes the short-term memory requirements by over 90%. So suddenly they can handle super long conversations with vastly less computing power. So, putting it all together, thanks to these brilliant software tricks, DeepSeek managed to build a world-class AI model, one that legitimately rivals the absolute top tier, for reportedly just under $6 million. To put that into perspective, Western labs are spending literally billions of dollars to train their models right now. It is just a total masterclass in efficiency born entirely out of necessity. Okay, but having incredibly efficient software is only half the battle. You still need massive physical infrastructure and huge ecosystems to actually train these models in the first place, right? So China's government stepped in and decided to treat computing power like a public utility, almost like public roads or electricity. They're building this national integrated computing power network. What this means is that a tiny, scrappy startup in Shanghai doesn't need to go out and buy $1 million worth of GPUs anymore. They just upload their code, rent processing power from massive data centers located thousands of kilometers away where the land and renewable energy are dirt cheap. And then they just download their finished model. It's plug-and-play AI on a national scale. Now, sprinkle in the ultimate AI fuel, data. Because for the next generation of AI, just reading text on the internet isn't going to cut it. AI needs to understand how the physical world actually behaves, and the best way to do that is through video. Enter Chinese companies like ByteDance, the folks who own TikTok, and Douyin. They have an absolutely unmatched ecosystem of video data. And it's not just the videos themselves. They have the raw analytics on how human beings react to every single frame. It's basically the ultimate training ground to teach AI about the real world. Which finally brings us to the real business strategy here. Why on earth are they giving these billion-dollar world-class models away for free? Well, they're essentially running the Google Chrome playbook. Google gives you their browser for free because it pulls you into their massive, highly profitable ecosystem of search, ads, and cloud services. Chinese AI labs are doing the exact same thing. They offer the model for free as the hook. Alibaba wants you to use Qwen for free so that eventually you get comfortable and build your entire enterprise application stack on Alibaba Cloud. They're selling the ecosystem, not the model. You see, because they initially couldn't win on raw horsepower against the top-tier American models, they realized they had to win on distribution. By releasing these open-weight models, they let developers completely fine-tune the AI for their own specific companies. And once a developer hardwires that model into their internal systems, the switching costs become insanely high. Nobody wants to rip out their foundation and start over. It creates this massive lock-in network effect, doing for AI exactly what Google did by making Android free for smartphone makers. And this open-source strategy, it is so powerful that it's already crossing borders and infiltrating the top tiers of Western tech. Take Cursor, for example. They are one of America's absolute fastest-growing AI coding companies. They literally built their proprietary coding product, Composer 2, right on top of a foundation model from a Chinese company called Moonshot AI. These models aren't just cheap knockoffs anymore. They're becoming the absolute bedrock that American companies are actively building upon. And underneath all of this success is a highly coordinated long-term effort. This wasn't an accident. Back in 2017, China rolled out a national AI plan that basically divided and conquered. They assigned very specific sectors to major private companies to act as national champions. Baidu was put on autonomous driving, Alibaba was handed smart cities, Tencent focused on medical imaging, and iFlyTech took the lead on voice tech. Now, these companies still fiercely competed for market share, but they were collectively building out the nation's entire AI infrastructure in a very deliberate, structured way. So stepping back from the immediate geopolitical chess match, and look, the US totally points out concerns over IP and data privacy, while critics rightly note that Western AI models also hoover up massive amounts of personal data. But setting the geopolitical finger-pointing aside for a second, we really need to focus on the ultimate lesson this whole saga provides for the rest of the world. And that big, global takeaway is the concept of sovereign AI. Basically, it means a country absolutely must maintain enough of its own computing power, local talent, data, and infrastructure so that it isn't entirely dependent on foreign intelligence. Imagine waking up tomorrow and the US or China suddenly decides to lock down their AI ecosystems. Countries like India or nations across Europe would risk losing access to absolutely crucial society-running technology overnight, all because of a political dispute they aren't even a part of. Because honestly, the next major global blockade, it probably won't be about stopping oil tankers or weapons or physical goods. It might just be a blockade on access to intelligence itself. And that leaves us with a critical, incredibly urgent question to ponder. Is your country actively building its own sovereign AI ecosystem, or are you entirely at the mercy of foreign decisions? Something to think about.
Uncovering what others ignore.